Hi, friends. How are you doing today? I'm doing um, pretty great, actually. Better than usual. I've learned, I've not learned yet, but somebody probably, okay. One of the coolest person on earth taught me how to roll joint yesterday. Legal weed. We don't do illegal shit here. So legal weed. Maybe that's gonna get me censored from YouTube. Sorry if it does. Sorry, original Wolf, to mix your content with Wheat Dog. And I had a great day, so I'm doing great right now, which doesn't mean I'm not anxious. A little, but I'm doing pretty good right now. And it's great. Yeah. Um, so that's about it. I hope you're doing good. Like, it's been a hard few months. Let's hope it's gonna get better soon, or at least, like, even if everything going on in the world is still a lot to take in. I hope your close personal life is doing as good as it can. Mm, Sorry, was looking if there were any bug in my office. For some reason, I thought I saw one. Um, I'm gonna read more, and we'll talk a little. I don't have much to say, but I've seen, like, I talked a few episode ago about Titan from Julia Ducournau, and I've seen it. So you'll get to hear my review of Titan after one part of Lighthouse, and not a full review, but like what I thought about it. Um, okay, I'll take some coffee. It's decaf. It's 2 in the morning. Oh, also, I've been doing great progress at the guitar, so that's another great thing. Well, great progress. I know how to play basically 2 songs, so now I feel like a rock star, um, which is a great feeling. For Cam grazed the easel by an inch. She would not stop for Mr. Banks and Lady Briscoe, though Mr. Banks, who would have liked a daughter of his own, held out his hand. She would not stop for her father, whom she grazed also by an inch, nor for her mother, who called Cam, I want you a moment, as she dashed past. She was as like a bird, bullet or arrow, impelled by what desire, shot by whom, at what directed, who could say, what? Mrs. Ramsay pondered, watching her. It might be a vision of a shell, of a wheelbarrow, of a fairy kingdom on the far side of the hedge, or it might be the glory of speed. No one knew. But when Mrs. Ramsay called Cam a second time, the projectile dropped in mid-career, and Cam came lugging back, pulling a leaf by the way to her mother. What was she dreaming about? Mrs. Ramsay wondered, seeing her engrossed, as she stood there with some thought of her own, so that she had to repeat the message twice. Ask Mildred if Andrew, Miss Doyle, and Mr. Rayleigh have come back. The words seemed to be dropped into a well, where, if the waters were clear, they were also extraordinarily distorting, that even as they descended, one saw them twisting about to make heaven knows what pattern on the floor of the child's mind. What message would Ken give the cook? Mrs. Ramsay wondered, and indeed it was only by waiting patiently and hearing that there was an old woman in the kitchen with very red cheeks drinking soup out of a basin that Mrs. Ramsay at last prompted that parrot-like instinct which had picked up Mildred's word quite accurately and could now produce them. If one waited in a corner or less sing-song, shifting from foot to foot, Cam repeated the word "No, they haven't," and I've told the man to clear away the tea. Clear away tea. Okay. Minta Doyle and Paul Rayleigh had not come back then. That could only mean Mrs. Ramsay thought one thing: she must accept him, or she must refuse him. It's going off after luncheon for a walk. Even though Andrew was with them, what could it mean except that she had decided, rightly, Mrs. Ramsay thought, and she was very, very fond of Minta, to accept that good fellow, who might not be brilliant, but then Mrs. Ramsay, realizing that James was tugging at her to make her go reading aloud The Fisherman and His Wife, she did in her own heart infinitely prefer boobies to clever men who wrote dissertation. Charles Tansley, for instance. And it must have happened one way or another by now. I need some air. The bar is so low for men. It's good for me because, SFR. Anyway, but she read. Next morning, the wife awoke first, and it was just daybreak. And from her bed, she saw the beautiful country lying before her. Her husband was still stretching himself. Not that I wouldn't do effort, obviously, trying to be the best of myself. The best myself I can be. You get what I mean. But how could Minta say no, that she would not have him? Not if she agreed to spend the whole afternoon trapezing about the country alone, for Andrew would be off after his crabs. But possibly Nancy was with them. She tried to recall the sight of them standing at the hall door after lunch. There they stood, looking at the sky, wondering about the weather, and she had said, thinking partly to cover their shyness, partly to encourage them to be off, for her sympathies were with Paul. There isn't a cloud anywhere within miles at which she could feel little Charles Tansley, who had followed them out, snigger. But she did it on purpose. Whether Nancy was there or not, she could not be certain, looking from one to the other in her mind's eye. She read on. Wife, said that man. Why should we be king? Sorry, I do not want to be king. Well, said the wife, if you won't be king, I will go to the Flounder, for I will be king. Come in or go out, Cam, she said, knowing that Cam was attracted only by the word Flounder, and that in a moment she would fidget and fight with James as usual. Cam shut off. Mrs. Ramsay went on reading, relieved, for she and James shared the same taste and were comfortable together. And when he came to the sea, it was quite dark gray, and the water heaved up from below and smelled putrid. Then he went and stood by it and said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, come I pray thee here to me, for my wife, good Ilzabil, will not as I'd have her will. Reading poetry is art. I have a full book of Emily Dickinson poetry, which I love a ton, but reading poetry, I think reading poetry out loud is better than reading it in your mind's eyes, because there's a rhythm and you kind of need to get it for poetry to make sense. Well, when it's that kind of poetry, that's it. And it's too easy to read the way you read a book quickly. I'm saying that because there was that part's a little fun here. And it made me talk about that, and just that's the point of the show, I think. Well, what does she want then? Said the Flounder. And where were they now? Mrs. Ramsay wondered, reading and thinking quite easily, both at the same time, for the story of the fisherman and his wife was like the bass gently accompanying. I know it shouldn't. Accompanying a tune, I know. I'm not saying this the right way, but which now and then ran up unexpectedly into the melody. And when should she be told? If nothing happened, she would have to speak seriously to Minta, for she could not go trapezing about all over the country, even if Nancy were with them. She tried again, unsuccessfully, to visualize their backs going down the path and to count them. She was responsible to Minta's parent, the hole and the poker. Her nicknames for them shot into her mind as she read, the hole and the poker. Yes, They would be annoyed if they heard, and they were certain to hear that Minta staying with the Ramsays had been seen, etc., etc., etc. He wore a wig in the House of Commons, and she ably assisted him at the head of the stairs. She repeated, fishing them up out of her mind by a phrase which, coming back from some party she had made to amuse her husband. Dear, dear, Mrs. Ramsay said to herself, how did they produce this incongruous daughter, this tomboy Minta with a hole in her stocking? How did she exist in that portentous atmosphere? This word portentous, I don't know what it means. I'll look it up after. Where the maid was always removing in a dustbin the sand that the parrot had scattered, and conversation was almost entirely reduced to the exploits, interesting perhaps, but limited after all, of that bird. Naturally, one asked for a lunch, tea, dinner, finally to stay with them up at Finlay, which had resulted in some friction with the whole, a mother and more calling and more conversation and more sand, and really at the end of it, she had told enough lies about parrots to last her a lifetime. So she had said to her husband that night coming back from the party. However, Minta came, yes, she came, Mrs. Ramsay thought, suspecting some thorn in the tangle of this thought, and disengaging it found it to be this a woman that once accused her of robbing her of her daughter's affection. Something Mrs. Doyle had said made her remember that charge again, wishing to dominate, wishing to interfere, making people do what she wished. That was the charge against her, and she thought it most unjust. How could she help being like that to look at? No one could accuse her of taking pains to impress. She was often ashamed of her own shabbiness. Nor was she domineering, nor was she tyrannical. It was more true about hospital and drain and the dairy. About things like that she did feel passionately and would, if she had the chance, have liked to take people by the scruff of their neck and make them see. No hospital on the whole island. It was a disgrace. Mail delivered at your door in London, positively brown with dirt. It should be made illegal. Amadel Dairy and hospital up there. Those two things she would have liked to do herself, but how? Without these children, when they were older, then perhaps she would have the time when they were all at school. I love how the character always have those stray thoughts coming in and out. And like, you know, like her thinking about that is not a defining moment, and it's not going to change the story. It's just a stray thought that happened. And like the characters, I think in this book have all, especially Mrs. Ramsay, of course, but like, I have this, this very complex interior life, and I feel I'm into too much right now, but like I feel as a writer was a woman, Virginia Woolf probably had a more interesting interior life than people would see in her. And I think like for interesting character for books, in movies it would be very hard to show, but still I could make great stuff too. Oh, but she never wanted James to grow up the older or Ken either. These two she would have liked to keep forever, just as they were demons of wickedness, angels of the light, never to see them grow up into long-legged monsters. Nothing made up for the loss. When she read just now that, to James, and there were numbers of soldiers with kettle drums and trumpets. Sorry. And his eyes darkened. She thought, why should they grow up and lose all that? He was the most gifted, the most sensitive of her children. But all, she thought, were full of promise. Prue, a perfect angel with the others, and sometimes no, and at night especially, she took one's breath away with her beauty. Andrew, even her husband, admitted that his gift for mathematics was extraordinary. And Nancy and Roger, they were both wild creatures now, scampering about over the country all day long. As for Rose, her mouth was too big, but she had a wonderful gift with her hands. If they had charades, Rose made the dresses, made everything, liked best arranging tables, flower, anything. She did not like it that Jasper should shoot birds, but it was only a stage. They all went through stages. Why, she asked, pressing her chin on Jane's head, should they grow up so fast? Why should they go to school? She would have liked Alois to have had a baby. She was happiest carrying one in her arms. Then people might say she was tyrannical, domineering, masterful. If they chose, she didn't mind. And touching his hair with her lips, she thought he will never be so happy again, but stopped herself, remembering how it angered her husband that she should say that. Still, it was true. They were happier now than they would ever be again. A tenpenny tea set made Cam happy for days. She heard them stamping and crowning on the floor above her head the moment they woke. They came bustling along the passage. Then the door sprang open, and in they came, fresh as roses, staring wide awake, as if this coming into the dining room after breakfast, which they did every day of their life, was a positive event to them, and so on with one thing after another all day long until she went up to say good night to them and found them netted in their cots like birds among cherries and raspberries, still making up stories about a little bit of rubbish. Something they had heard, something they had picked up in the garden. They had all their little treasure. And so she went down and said to her husband, why must they grow up and lose it all? Never will they be so happy again. And he was angry. Why take such a gloomy view of life? He said. It is not sensible. For it was odd, and she believed it to be true, that with all this gloom and desperation he was happier, more hopeful on the whole than she was, less exposed to human worries. Perhaps that was it. He had always his work to fall back on. Not that she herself was pessimistic, as he accused her of being, only she thought life, and a little strip of time presented itself to her eyes, her 50 years. There it was before her, life, she thought, but she did not finish her thought. She took a look at life, for she had a clear sense of it there, something real, something private, which she shared neither with her children nor with her husband. A sort of transaction went on between them in which she was on one side and life was on another. And she was always trying to get the better of it, as it was of her, and sometimes they parleyed when she sat alone. There were, she remembered, great reconciliation scenes, but for the most part, oddly enough, she must admit that she felt this thing that she called it life terrible, hostile, and quick to pounce on you if you gave it a chance. There were the eternal problem, suffering, death, the poor. There was always a woman dying of cancer, even here, and yet she had said to all these children, you shall go through with it. To 8 people, she had said relentlessly that, and the bill for the greenhouse would be £50. For that reason, knowing what was before them, love and ambition and being wretched alone in dreary places, she had often the feeling, why must they grow up and lose it all? And then she said to herself, brandishing her sword at life, nonsense, they will be perfectly happy. And here she was, she reflected, feeling life rather sinister again, making to marry Paul Rayleigh, because whatever she might feel about her own transaction, and she had had experiences which needs not to happen to everyone. She did not name them to herself. She was driven on too quickly, she knew, almost as if it were an escape for her to say that people must marry, people must have children. That's an interesting paragraph. I'll just let it stay there for now. Was she wrong in this? She asked herself, reviewing her conduct for the past week or two, and wondering if she had indeed put any pressure upon Minta, who was only 24, to make up her mind. No, she wasn't easy. Had she not laughed about it? Was she not forgetting again how strongly she influenced people? Marriage needed, all sort of qualities. The bill for the greenhouse would be £50. One, she need not name it. That was essential. The thing she had with her husband had they that. Then he put on his trouser and ran away like a madman, she read. But outside a great storm was raging and blowing so hard that he could scarcely keep his feet. House and tree toppled over, the mountains trembled, rocks rolled into the sea. The sky was pitch black, and it thundered and lightened, and the sea came in with black waves as high as church towers and mountains, and all with white foam at the top. She turned the page. There were only a few lines more, so that she would finish the story, though it was past bedtime. It was getting late. The light in the garden told her that, and the whitening of the flowers and something gray in the leaves conspired together to rouse in her a feeling of anxiety. What it was about she could not think at first. Then she remembered. Paul and Minta and Andrew had not come back. She summoned before her again the little group on the terrace in front of the hall door, standing looking up into the sky. Andrew had his net and basket. That meant he was going to catch crabs and things. That meant he would climb out onto a rock. He would be cut off, or coming back single file on one of those little paths above the cliff. One of them might slip. It would roll and then crash. It was growing quite dark, but she did not let her voice change in the least as she finished the story, and added, shutting the book and speaking the last words as she had made them up herself, looking into James' eyes. And there they are, living still at this very time. And that's the end, she said. And she saw in his eyes, as the interest of the story died away in them, something else take its place, something wandering, pale, like the reflection of a light, which at once made him gaze and marvel. Turning, she looked across the bay, and there, sure enough, coming regularly across the waves, first two quick strokes and then one long, steady stroke, was the light of the lighthouse. It had been lit. In a moment, he would ask her, are we going to the lighthouse? And she would have to say, no, not tomorrow. Your father says not. Happily, Mildred came in to fetch them, and the bustle distracted them. But he kept looking back over his shoulder as Mildred carried him out, and she was certain that he was thinking, we are not going to the lighthouse tomorrow, and she thought he will remember that all his life. Okay, so that's it for now. I thought that was a very interesting chapter, but it's still going on. Too much in my head to talk about it. Let's talk about Titan. So I saw Titan, and Titan from Julia Ducournau. So it's her second movie, second long métrage, we say in French. Second film that is not short, and second feature film, we would say. That's the word I was looking for. After Raw, which kind of became a cult classic instantly after being shown at, I think it was not like un réalisateur, but un certain regard, the Un certain regard selection at Cannes. And it deserves it. I think it deserves it. It's not a perfect movie, and it deserves it. And Titan won Palme d'Or. So Palme d'Or for a second movie is fucking impressive. I know. I think 4 months, 3 weeks, 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days. The Christian Among You one was also a second movie. I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on that. I mean, it's not the only second one, but that I can think about from recent memory. And it's kind of funny because I was talking about the fact that, Titan is the second movie where it's a woman that win the Palme d'Or, the second after the piano from Jane Campion. And there's a lot of debate about the feminism, the importance of showing having women filmmaker present and diversity in the programmation, and I'm really pro. I think it should be 50-50 in general, and I think we should see like more diversity in the countries that are represented too, and the ethnicities, obviously. But whatever. So it's the second movie where a woman won, and it's kind of on top of being only the second time a woman win. The last few years, a woman was favorite and lost to another movie that wasn't as much of a favorite. So I'm thinking about Portrait de la jeune fille en feu from Céline Sciamma, who lost to Parasite from Bong Joon-ho, which I think Portrait should have won. I like Parasite, okay, but I like Parasite, okay, but it's a movie that like I'm happy a foreign movie won Oscar for Best Picture, but it's kind of weird. It's that one. Like it's not even Bong Joon-ho's best movie. It's far from his best. I think it's probably one of his worst, actually. But anyway, that's what I think. And I think Portrait should have won. No problem against that movie. And I'm thinking the others, Tony Erdmann, I think, lost to Danielle Blake. I think Tony Erdmann didn't even win a prize this year. Like the selection, the jury selection was weird. It's how it works. Like jury or not. Sometimes they make weird choice. You could say Titan is a weird choice, and sometimes you agree with them, and sometimes you disagree with them. But like it was kind of sad that like women have been underrepresented for so long at the Cannes Film Festival, and those movies that were favorite would go out with either no prize or like disappointing prize. And I absolutely adore Tony Erdmann too. It's a weird one because it's a movie that had a lot of positive buzz, and then a lot of people saw it and were okay, that's just that. But I think the problem with Tony Erdmann is that it's kind of a movie that is both subtle and niche, in that it looks like a broad comedy enough that it got like a good popular success, and like it was supposed to be remake in Hollywood. I think I don't know if the remake is still on track, but it was supposed to be Jack Nicholson's like comeback for a while. Was to play Anthony Erdmann with Kristen Wiig, which was a good casting, but like it gives you the impression that they're doing a broad comedy. Like you can expect Will Ferrell to be there and whatever. And Tony Erdmann plays like a broad comedy, but what works in that movie is the underlying thing that works in this movie is so subtle for me that I feel some people maybe don't connect with it. And I'm not saying that's because like they missed it or they're dumb. Like it's not a question of like if you don't like that movie, you're stupid though. At least I would like you to recognize what's going on. It is like there's great movies that just don't work for me. Like Tarkovsky, I love Tarkovsky's in general, but for some reason Andrei Rublev doesn't work for me. It's a great movie, but like I just can't. Whereas Stalker or The Sacrifice, I love The Sacrifice to death. Even though it's not even one of the favorite one, I think the people in general. I'm going far away now. Just saying, it was kind of disappointing to see Tony Erdmann lose to, I think it was Danielle Blake, and I don't care much for Danielle Blake. I think it's an okay movie, but that's kind of a boring Palme d'Or. But when you look at Portrait de la jeune fille en feu and Tony Hardman, they're both like big fucking masterpiece, I would say. Like the same way, when you see a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and whether it's like There Will Be Blood or The Master, or like especially his late movies, like you're like, okay, that dude's trying to do the great American masterpiece. Like he's not, whether he's failing or not or succeeding is your opinion, but like they're fucking big movies that are perfectly thought out and like perfectly orchestrated. And I think you could say something similar about Portrait de la jeune fille en feu, and that it's a big fucking movie that works, that is so controlled and that is so mature and so thought out, and like you could like it's it works on the same level as a Tolstoy novel or as that great French novel or whatever, something very important that feels important. And the same thing, as much as Tony Hardman can work as a broad comedy, I still think it just like it's a fucking 2 hour and 40 minutes movie that like just gets you, and like it's well made and whatever. Whereas Titan, I'm not saying Titan is a mess, and I love Titan is a lovely mess. It's a mess that I like. So it's kind of surprising I won the Palme d'Or, because if you compare it to Portrait de la jeune fille en feu and Tony Ironman, or like most Palme d'Or are very mature movie, whereas I feel Titan is a very very young energy as a movie, in that like it's kind of a fucking mess, but it's also a fun mess. And like it's you feel like Julia Ducournau is like throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks, and a lot doesn't stick, but you kind of appreciate that it's there even if it doesn't stick. It's a movie I never like. Normally, the Palme d'Or is this big, heavy movie. I remember the first Palme d'Or I've seen, knowing what was the Palme d'Or was Elephant by Gus Van Sant, and like that's a big fucking movie about important subject and whatever. And there's argument to say Elephant might be a little easier than other movie that won the Palme d'Or, and I love Elephant, and but it looks important. Whereas Titan is like super entertaining and super funny and weird and goes places that you don't expect those movie to go. And it's probably the first, like I was a kid, I was a teen that grew up on like horror comedy like Brain Dead and Bad Taste and like these very Evil Dead and all that shit, like these very violent, gory movie that were funny because they're gory, and that's yeah, like this very broad, stupid humor where it's creative but it's kind of dumb because it's funny because you see somebody's intestine and he gets hit by a car, and instead of being realistically hit by a car, he explodes in like a ton of bits, and that's kind of funny. And like Titan might be the first um, movie to win the Palme d'Or that has gore jokes in it, and I think that's kind of amazing. I'm not saying it's going to be funny to everyone, because there's still like it's still talk about dysphoria, gender, and like important issues, but it has like kind of a shotgun approach to them where stuff will either be funny or disgusting or sad or maybe like everything at the same time, and a lot of different people will take them a lot of different way, and that's why I read a lot of review about it, and I've seen a lot of detractors being why people take this movie so seriously. I'm like, I don't take this movie too seriously. Like I never laughed that much watching a Palme d'Or. I think some of the moments of that movie are hilarious, but like one of the moments I think was the funniest is when a character is trying to kill another person, and it's kind of a violent scene, so I could see somebody else seeing that scene and being, oh no, that's shocking, but I found it funny. And I think Julia Ducournau would, well, I haven't talked to her obviously, but I think she would agree with both interpretations. I think she's both trying to be shocking and funny at the same time, and that people would get it in different way works. And yeah, I don't think Titan will be remembered as this big masterpiece like Portrait de la jeune fille en feu will, but it's an invigorating movie, and I really like that it can win a Palme d'Or. Well, like you see me talking about it, I'm just so it kind of like it's not a happy movie, but it kind of makes me happy that such a crazy thing can get there and win a Palme d'Or. Like I wouldn't be curious, I haven't seen it, but I think best directing was won by Yamaguchi Drive My Car, and I wouldn't be surprised in the future if the critical consensus say Drive My Car was the best movie there, but Titan might be the most interesting movie of the selection. Interesting choice. It's a good choice for a Palme d'Or. The same way like Uncle Boonmee, which also won the Palme d'Or and was also not a movie that you expected to win a Palme d'Or, but that's so like that was a surprise, and I think that was a good surprise. I also think Titan is is a very cool surprise. So see it and keep an open mind, and like I think it's funny. One, I don't think it's funny because like one of the first thing Julia Ducournau said when she got a palm was, okay, I know my movie's flawed. And I think it's kind of sad because like it's more expected from women than from men to be self-aware of their issues. Like if a man, like you think, I think Theo Angelopoulos won a prize once at Palme d'Or, and it won a prize at Cannes once, which wasn't the Palme d'Or, and he said, "What the fuck, you're not giving me the Palme d'Or? I obviously made the best movie there." And not that he was wrong; he's a great filmmaker, but you know, like you wouldn't see, it would be surprising, and I think a woman doing the exact same thing would be criticized so much nowadays. But anyway, like Julia Ducournau said, oh, I know my movie has a ton of flaw. And like she's right, I think the movie is really imperfect, but I don't think you can make a movie with this level of energy and make it perfect. And at the same time, I think this, like we need movies like this. And we need movies like this that are like we don't need movie like this and that. I don't think it's gonna change how we perceive cinema or anything, but we need movie that have this energy and these this try everything attitude. And I think it's not condescending towards its audience in its way it tries anything. It's kind of admiring and like maybe sometime it fumble and it's his and just mess up, but I feel like the audience is invited in the mess up, in the messing up, and like it doesn't see its audience. It doesn't have a pedantic point of view towards its audience, and I don't think I don't like pretentious as a criticism because I think a lot of things that are said to be pretentious are not. They're just trying hard, and uh, uh, we've been used to think as anti-intellectual these days, and I think saying something is pretentious is fucking dangerous. But a lot of some movies see their audience and don't try to integrate their audience in their discourse, let's say. And I think Stan is like, yeah, let's get fucked up together, and I loved it for it. It's not my favorite. I don't even think it's gonna be my favorite movie of the year, but like it's probably, and I'd have a hard time recommending it to anyone really, but still like I kind of recommend it to everyone. Uh, the more I think about it, the more I love it. Even though the more I think about it, the more there's moments like I'm this dumb. Some stuff in there is fucking dumb, but I love it. So yeah, that's my opinion on Titan. This is gonna be it for the show today. I hope you liked it. Please like and subscribe if you liked it. If not, well, go away. I don't mind it. As long as you're not mean with me, you can ignore me and it's fine. Um, I haven't discovered any new music recently, well, this week. So I think I'm just gonna put that Sharon Van Eaton and Angel Olsen duo that they did. So Sharon Van Eaton and Angel Olsen are probably, let's say, in the top 10 best people in the world, and they made a duo together, and it's kind of perfect. It's kind of amazing, I think. Um, Kind of the best song of the year. Maybe there's a little hyperbole there, but whatever. I love them. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna put their song. I hope you like it. It's probably the most known thing I'm gonna share there, so maybe you already knew of it, but like it's good to remember it exists. Have a nice day. See you next time.